started. And I'm going to introduce Prasanth to you. And so we're pleased to welcome him, Prasanth Nair, with us to share his groundbreaking Into the Zone. He's the CEO of Double Gemini, and he's going to teach us a holistic model for understanding productivity at the individual, team, and organizational levels. We're expected to walk away today with a clear understanding of the major obstacles to productivity challenges and be inspired to tackle them in new and innovative ways. Prasanth is an internationally acclaimed productivity expert. He believes that productive people do better things for themselves, their organizations, their families, and the world. He's the creator of the STACK method, the world's preeminent email processing technique, which is available for free at stackmethod.com. And through his firm, Double Gemini, Prasanth teaches his email meeting and time management strategies to organizations across the globe. Outside of work, he is a father of 4 children, and in his ever-shrinking spare time, enjoys endurance training and triathlons. Before I totally give it over to Prasanth, I just wanted to see if, Chuck, you had anything you wanted to add before we get started.
No, just thank you for that, Laura. Welcome, everyone. I know how precious all of our time is, and to jump on a call on a Friday, much appreciated. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to have Prasanth here. We've been working with Prasanth and Anya from Double Gemini for the last few months. They've done some stellar work. For those of you that participated in the Pulse workshops, just amazing. And we're so excited to be partnered with Double Gemini to bring even more tools to all of you and to add value. So I'm excited. Prasanth, take it away.
All right. All right. Thanks so much, Chuck. Thanks, Laura. So let me actually start my slide here, share my screen, get us situated. You guys see the screen okay? Yeah? Okay.
Looks good.
All right. So, all right. Move the chat window a little bit so that I've got that out of the way. Okay. So, thanks again for having me. It's pretty awesome to be here. My name is Prasanth Nair. I am the CEO and really the product architect at Double Gemini. We're a productivity transformation firm. We focus on core productivity processes. So emails, meetings, time, task management, file management. We have worked with companies all throughout the United States, all across the globe, including Merck, Dropbox, Gap, Universal Music Group, Alibaba, as well as really hundreds of small and medium-sized firms, which is usually our sweet spot. We have had the pleasure of working with the COO Forum and its members before. And what we found is that our messages often sync pretty well with COOs. So I'm pretty pleased to be presenting to you guys today. I think this is kind of our sweet spot in terms of audience, the things that we do and the things that you guys need. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our firm and these things later. For now, I want to dive right into the topic. Just so you guys know, this is going to be a highly interactive presentation, so make sure you've got the chat window open and you're ready to go. If you don't have it open, just open it up. And as Laura said, just type in a quick hello, and so that we know that you've got it. For those of you guys that don't mind turning on your cameras, I'd love to see you. It always makes the presentation so much more fun. But I get it if you can't. And I know there's a certain amount of Zoom fatigue that everyone has. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. As we're going along, ask me questions, and you can ask me questions via the chat window. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that. Chuck or Laura, if I miss something that comes in the chat, just stop me. You can always just unmute too and ask out loud. I think we've got 40 people here. It should be pretty manageable. And really like to keep this conversational and interactive as we go along. Sound good? All right, here we go. So question for you guys, and just type your answers in the chat window, or show me via show of hands. How many of you have heard the phrase, "I'm in the zone"? Yeah? Okay. How many of you have seen athletes or musicians or actors or somebody who is performing, who's clearly in the zone when they were performing? Show of hands? Yeah? Okay. How many of you have experienced a moment where time was just flying by you were cranking out impressive work. You were completely immersed in the thing that you were doing when you were in the zone yourself. How many of you guys have experienced that? Yeah. Okay. You know, what I always find interesting at this point is that everyone knows what I'm talking about without even a formal definition. And of course you do, because it's a natural state. Being in the zone is a state of balance. And when you're off balance, I even think that you would know it intuitively. So towards this concept, this presentation has a singular purpose. So I want to present you with a model for getting in the zone. So it's a model that I use for analyzing my own productivity and understanding what prevents me from getting in the zone. But it's also a model that I use for analyzing our team's productivity and our clients' productivity. So I hope you find it valuable. Now, when we get into this model, I'm going to be presenting it from a personal perspective, like the perspective of an individual, because I find that's usually the best way for people to relate to this. But everything that I'm talking about pertains to teams and entire organizations as well. So attention. Attention is a really good place to start any discussion on getting in the zone. In my opinion, attention is the currency of productivity. So how many of you would agree that if you can't concentrate, you can't deliver, or at least that you can't deliver efficiently? How many of you would agree that? Right. Okay. So this, Tom DeMarco, he was this researcher and author. He discovered in the 70s that it took about 15 minutes for his developers to warm up on a task before they were cranking things out, and at least 10 minutes to produce any meaningful output. So how many of you guys have experienced that? You sat down, it took 10, 15 minutes to wrap your head around a report, a presentation, strategy document that we were working on before you started cranking. How many of you have experienced that? Yeah? Okay, everyone. Now, the amount of time that it takes to warm up depends on a few factors. It depends on the complexity of the task, but also your familiarity with doing it. So if it's a quick email, maybe it takes you 30 seconds to warm up, and then wrap your head around it, what they're saying, and then you're typing in the response. If it's a complex analysis, maybe it's 20 minutes to warm up. If it's a complex analysis, but you're really familiar with the subject area, maybe it's going to take you 10 minutes to warm up. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So let's say you're doing a 1 hour complex task, something you're not familiar with. So you warm up, which takes you about 15 minutes, and then you start working on it. So what we're looking at here is the anatomy of a 1 hour task. So that's great, but let's paint a picture of what usually happens. So you warm up, and then, oh, ping, got that interruption, Slack, email, text, notification, something. So what do you have to do? You have to warm up again, right? Okay, so let's warm up again and then start getting some work done, and then ping. Okay, well, let's warm up again. Let's get some work done. And then maybe there's another big interruption that takes you down this rabbit hole of like unintended places on the internet. It's like, didn't know that you were interested in underwater basket weaving, but somehow these links took you there. And then, so you warm up again, you finally crank the task out, right? So a 1 hour task has suddenly taken over 2 hours. How many of you guys can relate to that? For those of you on the chat too, you can type in yes, okay? So quick show of hands or chat responses. How many of you experience this once a month? At least once a month, you experience this level of interruption. How about once a week? How about once a day? All right, so a decent number of people, right? Okay, every day, I see daily, okay. So that was a single task, but this is what an entire day can look like, especially if you pepper in a few meetings to really like just mess things up, right? Does look familiar to everyone? It's kind of like my visual representation of what a day can look like. All right, so I once did this time study, and I found that I was losing about 20 hours a week on a 60-hour work week, so about 30% of my week just due to this pattern. If you're in umpteen hours of meetings a day and you're getting interrupted every 30 minutes or less, how are you supposed to get any work done? Also, you guys are COOs. How about all the people that work with you or for you, right? Think about that. Okay. So question for you, and type in your answers via the chat window. What's the biggest problem or problems with this working in this way? Take a second and type your answers into the chat window. And I agree with you, Scott. What's on your mind can definitely impact it. Yeah, always feel on fire, can't get in the zone, lack of sustained focus, interrupts deep thinking. Yep. Angst of that. Yeah, it can be scattered, Scott. Productivity is lost. Yeah, busy and exhausted, but unproductive. Yep. Okay. So, yeah, good ideas are lost because you get distracted, spurts rather than dedicated time. Yes, definitely all of those things. Okay, so these are all really good thoughts. Now, before I give you my perspective on this, let's take a look at an organized workday. So on the right, I've got an organized day, and so imagine this, it's an organized workday. You're able to work on one thing at a time. You can stay focused. You can do your email when you're doing your emails. You can be at work. You can hopefully handle a few less meetings. Would you feel better if you could work in this particular pattern all the time? Would you be more productive, right? Would you produce better quality work? Probably, right? So, so I once read, and I really believe this is true, that the majority of our habits are unconsciously built. And in my opinion, that's the biggest problem with the workday on the left. Unconsciously, a fragmented day leads to a fragmented week, leads to a fragmented month and year, and in the long run, it results in a fragmented mind. So what's at stake here is your mind. And the question is, what will you and even your team members, what will you become? So I've seen people whose identity becomes wrapped around this fragmented approach to working. It's really not healthy. If you continue to stick with jarring and unsustainable work patterns, in the long run, that's what you'll become, is you'll become fragmented. And the tragedy of a fragmented mind is lost potential. So humanity experienced the agricultural era, then the industrial era, and then now people say, the thought leaders say that we're in the knowledge era. So the currency in the agricultural era was land, the currency in the industrial era was equipment, and the currency of the knowledge era is attention. So the currency of productivity is attention. If you can own your own attention, you can produce dramatically more at a remarkable level of quality. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've seen people do it. So if you work to adopt sustainable, calming, attention-driven patterns of work, you'll essentially enter a new, you'll enter a new personal era, a new team era, and definitely a new organizational era, and you'll change the trajectory on what you'll become. And folks, I think this is really important. I think that people are not realizing, often don't realize the impact of technologies and work processes on our minds. And I think that it's to our detriment, even as a society as a whole. So I think this is pretty important and something to be aware of. Okay. So coming back to this, another question for you guys. Why isn't everyone working based on the pattern to the right? What are the obstacles to an organized, focused workday? What do you think? Meetings? Yeah. What else? Other people? Yeah, unfortunately, we've got to work with other people. They keep interrupting us. Demands? Yep. Yeah. The fear of not being responsive, especially with a lot of people on hybrid work, right? If you're not responding to email or your Slack messages every 2 minutes, you're not working. Or at least a lot of people can feel that way. Yep, calls, technology working against us. Yep, especially with all the notifications. Can't go by 15 minutes without a notification if you don't turn them off. Yeah, pride. That's really interesting, Daniel. That basically, or is it Chuck? Sorry, Chuck. We take pride in the ability to juggle a fragment a day and get results. There's so many things there, especially when we talk about multitasking. People that multitask get 50% less done and make 50% more errors. This is very commonly documented. So if you want the best to produce the best work quality, you can't multitask, and your people can't multitask, or they won't produce the best work quality. Okay, so all these are really good answers. Now I want to give you my perspective on what the obstacles are. So when I do that, I'm going to present the obstacles from an individual level, just because it's easier to understand. But again, as a reminder, everything that I'm going to show you also applies to the team. So to discuss the obstacles to getting in the zone, we need a framework. So I'm going to build the framework for you, and I want to start by evaluating a single task. So I've got a single task, and it's represented by this box, and I'm going to model out the obstacles to productivity starting with this. Okay, so this is a single task, and it's again, it's represented by this box. So the first dimension of this task is time. So from left to right, this box represents the progress, the time that you're working on a particular task. So the longer the box, the longer the time the task takes. Okay. So the second dimension of this box is brain power. So it's the mental bandwidth that you have to apply to the task at hand. So the taller the box, the more brain power you have to apply to the task. Is everybody with me so far? Get some thumbs up? Okay. All right. So the first and most critical, one of the most critical things that I've discovered is that there's two different layers to getting a task done with respect to your brain power. What I consider the content layer and then the process layer. So think about it this way. Let's say you're building, you have to build a presentation with Google Slides or PowerPoint, but you're terrible at using Google Slides or PowerPoint because, of course, who isn't? PowerPoint, by the way, just not to go on a rant here, it's one of the worst programs. It is so unusable. For those of you guys that have mastered it, kudos to you. Okay, so if you're using these kind of apps, you're going to basically spend the majority of your brain power dealing with the process layer of the task, as you can see here in the diagram, and you won't have a lot left to supply to the content. So how many of you guys have experienced that? You've struggled with a web or desktop or mobile application. Have you experienced spending the majority of your thought cycles just trying to use the darn thing instead of being able to focus on the content at hand? Yes? And on the chat window, can we see some yeses? You guys experiencing that as well? Okay, good. Yeah, sometimes, yeah. Okay. So there's another downside. The more effort that you spend on the process layer, the slower the task take. The slower it takes. Let's put it this way: the longer it takes to get the task done. Make sense? Okay. So another question: if you're spending all of your brain power on the process layer, do you think it'll affect the quality of your output? What do you think? Yes, definitely. Right? Okay. 100%. Yep, I'm with you, David. So keep in mind here, now one thing to keep in mind here is that the process layer isn't just about using a piece of software. It's also the know-how for how to do a task. So for example, I have a very simple but organized process for creating presentations. I have a straightforward process for how to write emails. I have a simple process for running meetings. So I have a simple process for taking notes. So all of these things help me recapture my brain and focus on the content instead of worrying about the process. So the first major obstacle to getting in the zone is work inefficiency. So work inefficiency is basically a reflection of how well you mastered the process layer. So your chances of getting in the zone are really small if you're not efficient with the process. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions so far? I'll look in the chat window just to make sure everybody's with me. Yeah. Okay. So as you get more efficient, the less time and energy that you spend in the process, and the more time and the more brain power that you have to spend on the content, right? And in general, the higher the quality your output will be, and the less time you will need to deliver the task. It's a question for you guys, just thinking about anything that you might be working on, kind of from a broad and general perspective. What can you do to be more efficient with the process layer for any task? Sorry about that, Jill. It's pretty funny. Have a system, have a structure, have one. I'm assuming that's having a process, right? Rich, not just having a task. A repeatable process. Yeah, sometimes you need to get over the learning curve, good staff to do it for you. Don't get lost in the details. Okay. So mastering a piece of software, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit. Keyboard shortcuts, that's another really great way to get efficient on a process. So just to give you an example there, a lot of times when people are thinking about work inefficiencies, they're thinking on these like large scale levels instead of the minutia. If for Gmail, I've mastered all the keyboard shortcuts, and we've done time studies with our clients, and we found that they save about a week of their year just by learning keyboard shortcuts. It takes about a half an hour to teach people keyboard shortcuts with Google. And so most people walk out of a session like that and they're 3 times faster. So there's really small things that you can do to focus on improving work inefficiency. So another interesting thing here is documenting your workflow, right? So a workflow is basically just a very simple description for how to do a process. So this is my workflow for how to create a presentation. It's intentionally super simple. I get out in my outline template, which I have. I define what's at stake for the audience. You guys saw that in this particular presentation. What's at stake here is your mind. Define what the new reality is, draft the outline, and then so on, right? Now, this workflow is written exactly as you see here in my Apple Notes. And now this is a simple workflow, but of course there's standard operating procedures or more complex workflows for many of the things that we do at work on a daily basis. And people often neglect to think about just documenting them so that they takes the burden off their mind. So people aren't thinking about those workflows. They're just executing on the task at that point. So workflows work because they offload the mental burden on your mind. So in this particular case, whenever I have to do a presentation, I'm not recreating the wheel. I've got a starting point to start triggering the thoughts about how to do it. And think about all the processes that you might do on a regular basis: presentations, analysis, writing, building particular spreadsheets, running meetings, sending emails, traveling. If you even go as simple as grabbing a notes app and start writing down your workflows, and even sharing those workflows with your team members based on common sets of patterns that you do, you'll be shocked at what a difference it can make in a really short time. Is everybody with me so far on the workflows piece? Okay. We have some clients that have invested heavily in workflows, and it's made just a world of difference on their staff, not even just in terms of productivity, but also in terms of lowering stress, higher engagement scores. There's so many different aspects to workflows that are often just ignored or just really not thought about. Okay, so the next major obstacle is interruptions. So interruptions, as we basically saw earlier, can significantly impact the time it takes to get a task done. They chew up brain power, especially due to context switching between tasks. So, and of course, they would have a huge effect on quality. So question for you guys, what can you do about interruptions? What can you do to minimize interruptions for either yourselves or even your team members? turn them off, block out time, create boundaries. Set status away. Yep. Yeah, I think all those techniques are really important. I think the single biggest thing that I've done is to turn off my notifications. I know a lot of people are can be worried about doing this, but I can tell you from having done this for over a decade, people don't notice how quickly you respond to your Slack or your G-chats as much as they notice the quality of your output. Not to mention your own well-being is significantly enhanced when you're not dealing with interruptions left and right. And then you won't have to spend nights and weekends catching up on work because you can actually focus during the day. So now I've outlined our first two obstacles, which are work inefficiency and interruptions are both shown here on the model. Everybody with me so far? Any questions? Good? Okay. So the next major obstacle is getting started. So I placed getting started on the front end of the task and slightly ahead of it in terms of the model. So how many of you have experienced this? You sat down to work on a task and you either bailed on the task or you procrastinated or you just took absolutely forever to get moving on it? Show of hands, yes, in the chat window? Okay. So what I've noticed is that getting started requires a significant amount of energy, often more than the task itself. Okay, so there are little things that you can do to decrease the energy required to get started. And my favorite one is something that I call a jump start. So imagine a scenario where a colleague has just sent you, has just built a presentation and they sent it to you and you need to give them some commentary. So instead of writing down the task itself, imagine if you also put a link to the task for accessing the presentation. So there's a link to the Google slide for the presentation. So then when you get to the task, you're ready to get going right away. So question for you guys, do you think something this simple would slightly decrease the amount of that obstacle of starting on a task? Just something this small? Yes? Okay. So if you're doing tasks over the course of the week without jump starts, a graph of your energy output just for getting started might look like this. And by the way, one thing that's really fascinating about the energy of getting started on a task, you've probably experienced it. I experience it especially when I'm like cleaning. Like getting started is so hard, but as soon as I'm cleaning, I'm like, oh, things are moving. I'm seeing some progress. I'm feeling it, right? So there's like this particular type of activation energy that's associated with it. So again, this is what a week might look like, a graph of energy output for getting started without jump starts. But as soon as you start adding jump starts to your task list, it can make a huge difference over the course of the week. So I see a lot of people hit Friday and they're burnt out. Now in comparison, myself, my team members, people that we train, they're usually fresh. And I think this has a lot to do with it because it adds up. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So coming back to our model, in my experience, there's something even before getting started that's pretty important. And that's deciding what to do in the first place. So that's the box to the left of getting started. So deciding what to do. So question for you guys, let's say you get to a point in the day where you're wide open for 2 hours. How many of you guys use a task list to decide what to do next? Just type in yes into the chat window, raise your hands. How many of you use a task list to decide what to do next? How many of you use a project plan? Anybody use project plans for deciding what to do next? Not so much, okay? How many of you just figure out what to do next just based on what's in your mind at the time? Some of you don't want to admit to it. All right, I get it. All right, so I've found that there's an there's an easy way of deciding what to do. So, and what I found is that it's usually best to plan out 1 week in advance. So myself, everybody at Double Gemini, we have a 2-hour session on Thursdays that's called Plan My Week. And the purpose of the session is for us, we all hop on the phone, but we independently plan out our weeks, the next week in detail, including writing down all of our tasks and putting in jump starts. So what we do specifically is I write down all my tasks, I put in all my jump starts for those tasks, and then what I do is I place those tasks into my calendar. So this is an example of my calendar on an absolutely crazy and hectic week. And there's some calendaring conventions that we use and that we teach. So co-works are work sessions with other people, plans are planning sessions, meets or meetings, workshops, and do's are personal tasks, and so on, right? So here is a calendar on a busy week. But the key point that I want to make about this is that I built this calendar the previous week. I knew what I was getting into. All of these have jump starts. I've got a clear concept of my week. And as crazy as this looks, it's actually manageable when you do that. Now, I might have a lighter week where the majority of my week is focused around a particular task. That's also fine, but the same principles apply. Each of these tasks has jump starts. I know what I'm doing. I've got a clear understanding of what I can accomplish, what I can accomplish. I've cleared obstacles. I even try to move meetings around and reschedule things so that I get longer, continuous blocks to work when necessary. Okay. Question for you guys: what's the advantage, or what are the advantages of planning in advance like this? Even if not to this level of detail, what are the advantages of planning in advance? Yep. Stay on task, get things done. Yeah, you own your schedule. Focus on the right priorities. Yeah, ensure that you have lots of time for work. Yeah, Krista, definitely understanding what you will and won't get done. When I look at a week, I know exactly what I'm going to be able to get done over that course of that week. Things take time, and task lists alone just aren't good enough at doing that. Yeah, you're mentally prepared for what's coming. That's a really interesting thing, Scott, that I want to explain and Sridhar, a greater sense of control. So because everybody on our team and our clients that we teach this particular technique to do their planning in advance, they're hitting the weekend with an understanding of what they can accomplish in the upcoming week. It dramatically lowers their stress. They've got visibility. They've made their agreements with their team members, their colleagues, over what meetings need to happen, when they need particular items from them, so that they can proceed on the work that they're dependent on from other people. And they have much better weekends too, because they're not thinking about this over the course of the weekend, instead of hitting the weekend kind of stressing about the rest of about what's going to happen the upcoming week, and not really having a sense of a really clear understanding of what you're supposed to get done. So when we do this for teams, it's just a game changer in terms of team members' engagement, in terms of the lowering their stress, and especially in terms of their quality of work-life balance. There's probably a huge number of your team members that almost have this low-grade fever over the weekend, just thinking about what the next week is going to hold, because they don't have a clear concept of it in mind. And all of that is just because they didn't spend a little bit of time deciding what to do. Now, just one quick note. Some people have said in the past, well, it's a 2-hour session. That's pretty big. It's pretty important that you have at least 2 hours, because if you condense that time, you're not going to give yourself space to think. And if you don't give yourself space to think, or your team members space to think, if you decide to do this activity as a group, you're going to crunch it, and you won't put as much quality into thinking about your schedule. You won't put as much quality in terms of determining your jump starts. And the result is that you'll be, you won't alleviate the stress of doing it. You'll have kind of a half-baked schedule that you're going into without the confidence required to really feel great about what the upcoming week can hold. So it looks like there's some questions on here. So let me come into it. So Mike had a question about what a jumpstart is. So Mike, a jumpstart is just a little note into a calendar entry or a task list for what to do to get started on it. So I've got here work on search discovery keynote. So if I'm working on the keynote, the jumpstart might be as simple as open the latest keynote file. Or it might be a couple of bullet points that I want to talk to somebody about for a meeting. Or it might be some ideas that I've got for brainstorm ideas for how to start on a particular task. It might be somebody's phone number or email address if I've got to send them an email. Any small little thing that could basically helps you get over the activation of energy of starting on a task. So let me see, is your calendar public? Yes, so internally on our teams, our calendars are public. So our teams have an understanding, my team has an understanding on priorities, availability, just like you're saying there, Rich. So it makes a huge difference. Tiffany, I started using my calendar in place of a task list to work well, as long as I don't neglect work during the big blocks of time. Yeah, so that's definitely one of the things that you've got to get to work. You've got to get to it as soon as you see that time block. And I use the Pomodoro technique just for doing that. So I find that's pretty effective. We can chat about that later. Yeah, that's true, Krista. A lot of people get stomach aches on Sunday or working anticipating the next week. Nobody checks your calendar. That's when also, Peter, it's good to say no and decline those meetings. Please check my calendar and look for an available time. So Krista, question, what is your read email time? Okay, so that's a little bit just outside of this schedule. So I do my email earlier in the morning just because of the way that I work. I usually get up, I do my exercise, I handle my email, then I take the kids to school, get them ready and move on. So that's where I check my email, but highly recommend that you have dedicated time blocks just to do email. We teach a particular technique called the stack method, and we have dedicated time blocks for at least an hour a day for doing and processing emails. So that's a really good question. And Krista, it's super important that you handle email, especially from an interruptions perspective, because it's one of the biggest reasons that our days are fragmented. One note to keep my jump starts. So what happens if you get calls during the day? I try not to answer them. I try to really stay focused on the things that are happening. If I absolutely need to take a call, kid, wife, VIP client, I'll take the call. But otherwise, I really do try to stay focused on the task at hand. Any other questions on this before I dive into the next piece? Okay. Okay, so back to the mob.
Yeah, actually, sorry.
Yeah.
I figured it would be simpler to just ask than write this.
Yeah.
So even though I'm a COO for a small company, and a lot of what I do is support the people who deal with the clients. And they're like, they're the ones that bringing in the revenue. So the way the CEO and I look at it is there are internal customers, and I'm the only one that's not one of the few that doesn't provide the service. So I have to be available. So when things come up that only, it's hard for me to have those blocks. I've tried it, and then I end up moving them all over the place because things come up that I have to troubleshoot and help people. So I can't, unfortunately, just ignore people or ignore things for long periods of time, especially if a workflow is broken or something I built broke and I have to step in. So what do you suggest in a circumstance like that?
Yeah, I think there might be ways for orchestrating those interruptions and the things that you need, that people need help with, to more dedicated time blocks. You could have office hours where people would know that, hey, if you run into an obstacle, or obstacle hours even, where people run into an obstacle, if it's not immediate, I'm open from 11 to 12 and from 3 to 4. So hop onto a call. It's an open Zoom. I'll answer your questions. I'll get you over the hump, right?
Mhm.
That's one way so that you're handling it proactively. You could have your own type of ticket or queue system. We've seen people where when they've got a question, instead of doing it via Slack or some other messaging system that requires these almost synchronous responses, which are really difficult to pull away from, you can put together a simple template with a simple subject heading where people can send you their requests via email. Those emails can come in, and then you've got a queue and you can decide when and how to work on them proactively rather than just jumping into it every 2 seconds. So that's another way. Another way is that you could identify the types of things that come in and assign experts within the organization for handling that so that you can start offloading it. Hey, if it's this type of issue, go to this person. If it's this type of issue, go to this person, so that becomes clear in the norm. So I think that there might be some strategies that you can apply that allow you to still be able to focus in dedicated time blocks. And I think there's a big advantage to that too, because one of your responsibilities is really, and key responsibilities, is to be strategic. And it's hard to be strategic and think strategically if you're constantly living in this interrupt-driven state.
Mhm.
So I think that you could identify, here's my strategic goals for the organization for the year or for the quarter, whatever that period of time. Make that list and then really focus on getting those things done. If you're constantly interrupt driven, I think that you're adding less value to the organization, especially given your role and your capabilities of understanding the big picture and what the possibilities are and how to take people there. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, I think I need to think it through a little bit and talk to my CEO to make sure I get her buy-in on some of this. But yeah, I think there's definitely something I can do.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions before we move on? So I see Krista, yes, office hours. So Scott, that's interesting. So how do you deal with constant emergencies that completely take you off track? So one of the things that we've recommended to clients is to plan those things out. So some clients have 20% of their schedule for the week. So 2 hours a day, just dedicated to firefighting. And so when they're planning their project time, they're making sure that they're not bucketing time into the firefighting time. And so that's just bonus time so that if they don't have to get to it, they're there. I think that I also think that emergencies are often due to lack of detailed planning in and of itself. And so I think there's some ways that you can structure the business either in terms of workflows or planning where you can significantly reduce the number of emergencies that happen. And we've been very effective at doing that. I think by cultivating proactive planning habits in general, even with the Plan My Week session, you can actually see the number of emergencies decrease significantly because people have to think through things. Huge example for an emergency. I'm working on a file, but I need somebody else's input or data to basically take it to completion. Well, it's due on Thursday. I just sat down to start working on it on Wednesday, and suddenly it's an emergency because I need that person to get me the information now. Well, it's not really an emergency, it's a lack of planning. And by doing that planning and agreeing and negotiating on those things ahead of time, then you can basically avoid that. So I think really by cultivating proactive planning habits, you can really decrease the number of emergencies that happen, as well as having strategies for dealing with those when they do. Is that helpful? I think that was Rich. Hopefully that was helpful. Any tips on how to manage Slack traffic? Good question, Sridhar. Yeah, I think that it's important to segment time for Slack and not let Slacks happen all throughout the day. So when we have clients that that ask us to be on their Slack channels and participate, I basically segment half an hour or 15 minutes at the middle of the day, 15 minutes at the end of the day to just basically go through Slack messages and deal with them, and my Slack notifications are off. Slack is a black hole. If any of you guys are fans of Cal Newport, I know Chuck, I think you are, with his deep work. He just wrote a book called, oh my God, it has the word email in the title. I'm forgetting the name. Somebody can do a Google.
A world without email.
World without email. And yeah, there you go. And Slack, email, they're incredibly detrimental to our concentration, affect our interruptions. Think it's really important that you own how you want to interact with not just those systems, but any system. Can't let the technology own you. You've got to own the technology. And so, it's pretty important. When we teach meeting hygiene, one of the things that we do is we ask people to be concentrated in meetings, not be on Slack, not be on any chats, but we make sure that we end meetings 10 minutes early. So in those 10-minute breaks, people can quickly check their Slacks, knock out a few things, and they can stay sane over the course of the day, and they're not dealing with it all throughout the day. And so those kind of punctuated moments are really good for handling things like that. But it's never going to work if you got your notifications on and work it that way. Yeah. So there's cultural expectations around it. There's also ways for organizing and orchestrating Slack channels to centralize the communication so that it works a little bit better, and policies that you can take. Slack just tends to end up always like derailing into like, happy into emojis and animated GIFs. So, I mean, I think there's a valuable cultural component for Slack. I think there's also a time to use Slack and a time to use email. And it's pretty important to know when each piece should go in, right? So when to use Slack, when to use email. Real quick, Chuck, I have till 12, right? Okay, cool. All right. So, all right, so coming back to the model. So the next thing that to add to the model here is mental state. So I put it here in yellow at the bottom. There's a fascinating book called Scarcity that points to research that when our minds are preoccupied with any one thing, we lose 10 to 15 IQ points on anything that we're trying to focus on outside of that thing. So how many of you guys have experienced that? You're working on a project, one project that's at work that's so important, you can't focus on anything else. Show of hands, experience that, right? How many of you had a situation where something was going on personally and you just couldn't focus on work, right? Everybody, right? So the point here is that your overall brain power can be significantly hampered by your mental state. Now, just to be clear here, I don't have solutions for all of this stuff. There's some stuff like mental state where sometimes the only thing that you can really do is like take it in stride, be compassionate to yourself and work from there. All right. So on the other side, limiting us from the top is our physical state. Now, our physical state can also dramatically slow things down. So again, show of hands, how many of you had a physical ailment, sore back, sore thumb, injured foot, whatever, just can't concentrate at work, right? Experience that, right? So as Laura had mentioned at the beginning of this, I have 4 kids. Do you think a lack of sleep would have a severe impact on your ability to get work done? Yes, I know that because I didn't sleep for about 10 years. So our physical state basically has a profound ability on our profound impact on our ability to deliver. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that your physical state can affect your mental state and vice versa. So if I'm exhausted physically, I'm often also mentally fatigued. So basically, I can crunch your bandwidth from both sides. So I put the physical state and mental state at the top and bottom of this graph because they sandwich the entire thing. So what can you do to ensure you're in a good physical state? All the basic things: diet, exercise, water, all these, all the basic things, the things that everybody knows they should do, have a pretty profound effect. Now, there's a gentleman named Jim Lohr, and he wrote a book about how it was more important to manage your energy than manage your time. And I've really found that to be true. The better I manage my physical state, the more productive I am, because it really affects everything. And I won't go into physical state because there are entire industries that are devoted to solving this. But totally happy to share strategies offline. Some of them, even most basic things, are just having a flask of water that I have to finish. We're often just so tired just because we're dehydrated constantly, over the course of a day. All right. Any questions on this so far? Everybody good so far? Cool. Okay. Now, there's one last piece to the model, and that's your identity. Now, this is the biggest obstacle of all because it has a massive effect on everything else. Now, when I say identity here, I could be referring to your personal identity, your team identity, or your organizational identity, which people call culture. So, as I mentioned earlier, consciously or unconsciously, people are identified with their work patterns. So here's an example. I worked with an executive who had 294,000 emails in her inbox. That was and it was this year. She was my new record holder. We help execs and EAs streamline their inboxes. So we got her down to 0, got her into a process where she was managing it. And then 2 weeks later, her EA called us and said that it was just getting to be right back to where it started. There's already 1,000 emails there. So this happened because this exec was so identified with being busy that they just couldn't operate in any other way. So basically what I had done is I turned her into a firefighter without a fire, and it didn't work. So that's something to keep in mind, just personally, but also for when you're thinking about your team and your organization. And identity as an obstacle can be even harder to overcome, at the larger levels. And of course, that's a larger topic to think about and talk about in terms of change management. Now, if we look at this model as a whole, one of the interesting things is to see how multiple factors can play into an overarching outcome. So, for example, project delays. A little slowdown in terms of deciding what to do, little slowdown in terms of getting started, little slowdown in terms of work inefficiency, a little slowdown due to interruptions, sprinkle in a few meetings, a little mental fatigue and a little physical fatigue, throwing this happening across an entire team, and suddenly an important project is behind, not because of one factor, but because of a combination of factors. There's a chain reaction that can happen here. Burnout, which is my favorite slide on the deck because of that lovely animation. So if you consume a little extra energy on every task in terms of deciding what to do, you're going to experience mental fatigue. If you experience a little more energy trying to get started, a little extra energy due to work inefficiency, a little extra energy because you're constantly combating interruptions, suddenly you've got a lot less bandwidth and you're more fatigued. It all adds up, and by week's end, you're going to be spent. So burnout isn't due to one factor, but it's a combination of factors, and really not having the right strategies in place to deal with those factors. So this is our model. And this is what I wanted to present you today. It's called the zone model. And the value of this model is that it can give you a starting point to diagnose your productivity at the individual level, at the team level, and definitely at the organizational level. And I'll make sure that we share this model with you guys as a PDF, so you've got access to it. Now, we've discussed a few techniques, but it turns out there are a lot of different techniques for dealing with these obstacles. And what I'm showing you on this page is not exhaustive. And you can even take this chart itself and print it out and start drawing your own ideas for your own things that you can do at the team or organizational level, or even at the individual level, for how to deal with it. And it's really not that difficult to put a number of these things into play. If you do this, start with one area, write down a few things that you're going to do, master it, pick another area, put it in play with the least amount of friction. And before you know it, you end up going through this series of small adjustments, and you've revolutionized the way you work. And also, don't just think in terms of the big picture. Often it's just the small picture items that make a difference. Here's an example, because somebody had mentioned email earlier. So most people let all of their emails just hit their inbox, but there's a bunch of emails and newsletters, receipts, meeting accepted invites, various notifications that you just don't need to see. And when we study it, often people are getting 30, 40, 50 of these types of notifications every day in their inbox. If you get 50 of those, that equates to over 12,000 messages over the course of a year. So that's 12,000 decision points over the course of a year, around 50 decision points a day, just due to that little thing. So if you get rid of all of those little decisions, do you think that it would improve your bandwidth over the course of a week, and then over the course of a year? Of course it would. I would even go so far as to say, it's the smaller the things are, especially at the team level and the organizational level, focusing on the little things is what can make the largest differences. So here you've got deciding what to do, plan my week, portfolio review meetings. You can use offloads and habits and automations to help getting started. You can have supportive leadership for a mental state. There's various training classes that you can use for work and efficiency, even for the specific jobs that your people do. We have one of our clients who is so gung-ho about training now that they make everyone go through specific classes and get 100% on the exams that are coming out of them. And these aren't that simple in terms of exams. And what they've said is that just over a period of 6 months, it's been a game changer for them, because people have levels of proficiency on using particular applications and tools that they never had before, down to keyboard shortcuts and really small things. And then, of course, with identity, there's things, and with interruptions, there's plenty of different things that you can tackle. Often those things need to happen at an organizational level, where you make particular agreements for how to work things. One more small example, if we're talking about it on a large scale. How many of you guys have a standard corporate meeting agenda template that everyone in the organization is required to use? Okay, not that many. One person on video at least, okay? 2 people on video. If every time you're going to a meeting and you have to reorient yourself
That's true.
with a different meeting agenda, that requires a certain amount of brain power, brain space to do it, right? You're like, okay, what is this? This is an agenda. Where are the topics? Oh, this person has listed them this way. This person listed them this way. This person is just using bullet points. You're reorienting yourself to every single meeting that you're doing. And so that is as Holly, as you mentioned, it makes a huge impact on your cognitive load if that's the case. So same thing with file management, same thing with even protocols for how to write emails. All these little things can make a huge difference. All right. That's great on the comments with EOS. Yeah, EOS is really helpful. And there's definitely other techniques that are out there. We might even have a few. All right. So I want to bring this all back to getting in the zone. So here's what I found. I found that as you peel away the obstacles, you'll notice that your bandwidth grows. And as you remove each obstacle, the better you can focus on the content, the faster you can get things done. And once the last obstacle is gone, time will just fade away, and you'll find yourself into the zone. And this is a real thing, and it feels pretty special. So being in the zone, as I've experienced it, is the mental equivalent of reaching space. So this diagram is my visual representation of it. You're working along and suddenly everything just feels effortless, and your creativity and your productivity skyrocket. I'm 49 years old, and I would say that I'm doing some of my most creative and impactful work now. And not because there's something special about me. I would even say that I've probably even had to work harder than most to get to the same level. But because of the work that I've done in terms of eliminating and focusing on the obstacles, I can drop into the zone on command. So my wish for you is personally is that you can someday you can experience this, having this ability if you can't already. If you work towards it, at a minimum, you can get more done with less stress. In the mid-range, you can experience a high degree of productivity with almost zero stress. And for those of you that are thirsty, you can really operate on an entirely new level. You can work with total ease and really tap into your true potential. But even more importantly, it's possible to get your organizations here. It's possible to give them strategies in training and set protocols that help them operate on an entirely new level. Now, if any of you are interested in learning about specific strategies or training protocols and how they could work for you or your team or your organization to really truly help them get in the zone, please contact me. I'll place my email into the chat window and you can reach out. What you're looking at here is some specific services that we offer that are designed to accomplish that. And with that, I want to thank you so much for being here, for listening to this presentation. And I'm really happy to stay on and answer any questions that you might have on really productivity from a broad perspective. So literally anything that you might have, I'm happy to talk to you about.
I think I'll start things off. Thank you so much, Prasanth. This has been great. And I can tell you from an organizational perspective, we at the COO Forum corporate level have all been using techniques from Pulse as well as Stack. And I know it's made a ton of difference already. And we have more room to go in terms of improving our productivity and efficiencies. I guess I'll start off with questions, and that is, when I was in the role of the COO in a manufacturing operation, I felt like one of my superpowers were the ability to juggle things and to jump into fires and put them out and build an identity around that. And I put a lot of value in that. So the question is, how do I break through that desire to want to be that firefighter in the moment and be able to jump in and solve problems and yet become more efficient? I'm worried about losing my identity, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think that to an extent, it's a matter of what the perspective is on your identity in terms of what's the greatest value that you can provide to the organization. If the greatest value is helping get through those obstacles, then maybe that's it. There are times when that is the most important thing, and major client deliverable, a project situation, and it's best for you to just roll up your sleeves, wade in, knock out obstacles, and move forward. But on the flip side, your role is a strategic role as a COO. So we had one COO who could never find the time to focus because if they weren't putting out fires, they were just busy working through their emails. And carving out and having dedicated time to sit back and think strategically is important. And I would even say that if you had a strategic time block where the only focus was to think strategically and you didn't even have an agenda, you just let the ideas come to you, it's amazing what that can do from a standpoint of giving yourself space to just generate ideas on, hey, what can we do better as a firm? Maybe that's the only question for that strategic thing strategic time block. I think you're right that it comes down to identity, and I think it's just it's determining what you can what value you'll bring. And it's not that you'd have to go, if any of you have experienced that, it's not that you have to go into that right away. You can start carving out time for doing that level of strategic thinking around various operations or processes, or generally for the business as a whole. And what I think you'll find is that if you give yourself more and more time to think strategically, you'll have a larger and larger impact on the organization as a whole.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Lafita, I'll piggyback on that. I think there's a transition in your leadership where you learn that your job is to be what I'll call a force multiplier. And I came from an industry where we assumed that we were going to get hit by a bus, right? So one of the tests of the leaders was, how well does your organization perform when you're not there? And if they don't miss a beat, then you're doing a really good job, which allows you to focus. I think in looking at this, I think a piece that you're not minimizing, but sort of gets minimized in process is actually process, right? I think the key is process. If you have good processes, you set boundaries for a team, then the rest you'll be able to focus on. But a lot of the problems COOs have is they don't have set office hours. They don't have a process where, hey, if you're walking in my door with a problem, you better have 1 or 2 answers. Don't just throw everything on me. And I'm not a firefighter. If I can, I want to delegate it down. And I don't know if you're seeing that. Often a lot of the problems are we're spending time on process because we don't have one.
Yep. Yeah, workflows go a long way towards this. A lot of times, even the process, that the issues is with new people as they're coming on board. Things fall through the crack and in their ramp up time, and putting together just basic workflows for this stuff just be a game changer, even for small things. I mean, yeah, people need time to adjust into roles and do particular jobs, and we often have this bias if we've been doing them for a long time that they're just easy, but they're not. We teach people very simple strategies for writing emails and like Pulse or managing their emails, but super smart people still need a decent amount of time to warm up on them to get them done. So yes, share the slide deck. Yes, I'll share a bridge version of the deck with you for sure, with all the key points. Krista, looks like you have a question. Any ideas on how to prevent the great ideas from letting me sleep at 3 a.m.? I think that's working with offload. So a notebook right next to your bed is probably the best way to get that offloaded. All ideas that wake me up in the night will stay in my head unless I write them down. So I think that's super important. What I'll actually do is I'll record them into my phone. My wife never wakes up, so if she did that, I would wake up in a heartbeat. But like, I could just record it into my phone. She doesn't care. So that's the way I handle it. I actually even have taken it a little bit further than that. Siri, I have one of those Apple home devices, and so I'll just say it out loud to Siri, and I can't say it right now because my Siri on my desk will record it, but I'll just say it out loud, hey, Siri, and then I'll say, add this reminder, and it'll do that. Never mind. And so that's how that works. So that might be helpful as well. Can use some of that technology to your advantage.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Hi, this is Scott. So I just joined this company about 6 months ago. Our founders are husband and wife. They're in India. They've been running 3 companies in healthcare without a management team, kind of running it as a mom and pop shop to about 20 million in revenue, and then decided, okay, we need to really build out a management team and get ready to scale and all of that. So they started with me. I've now hired my vice presidents, owners of each of the businesses. And the founder is typical founder who needs kind of founder management because he chases a lot of shiny objects, which I've experienced in many startups before. So we started talking about having a vision and strategy meeting for the company, because there is no clearly defined vision that everybody understands, and you can't develop strategy unless you have a vision. And his first reaction to that was, great, we need to do that. I'm going to get our guy from EOS to come in and run it. And, you know, when he started to talk to us about the vision strategy session, it became an EOS commercial. And it's like, okay, let's talk about our 10-year goals for each of our departments. And, you know, we're going to break down our rocks and do all the kind of EOS stuff. And my comment to him was, I love EOS. I'm not opposed to it whatsoever. It's a great tool, but you can't really use EOS until you've got a defined vision, you've got your major strategies kind of agreed to, and then you kind of break down into, you know, the pieces. That's where EOS, in my mind, comes in, because that's where you use the tool to kind of track what everybody should be doing, right?
Yep.
So to me, you don't start with EOS and then kind of later do the vision and strategy thing. So the question is, sorry about the long.
Yeah, no, it's good.
But the question, I'm looking at your screen here and I'm seeing vision and chorus. And is this the time to bring in a consultant and say, hey, we need a moderator for this, because EOS isn't the moderator. They're like just a tool that comes later?
Yeah, I think so. There's chorus, you can see, is our strategic planning, and everything else is how to execute a strategic plan on our side. And yeah, I think so. I think that having a moderator is going to be really important, because they're going to be an outside viewpoint, and they'll have experience, hopefully, dealing with founders like that. And then, like you said, that EOS is the tool, but it's not the idea, you know, or the concept or the strategy itself. And yeah. So the short answer is yes. And I could kind of go a lot more into philosophies on thinking about strategy and how to define it, but we can pick that up offline if you're ever interested, or I can point you towards some resources.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yep. Looks like I've got another question. What do you find is the key to maintaining these healthy habits and practices you shared today? Okay, I think the key Sridhar, on the individual side or on the team side, or both? Maybe I'll just answer.
Actually, both, Prasanth. Thank you.
Okay, so on the individual side, it's just to start small and build things up over time. You don't want to boil the ocean. You want to just tackle one little thing, master it, make sure you've got good control over it, move on to the next thing, and then use it as a set of building blocks. It's almost like with James Clear when he was talking about Atomic Habits. If any of you have seen that book, just start with one habit, build the next habit, build the next habit, and start layering it. So I think that it's really important. There's even strategies for pinning one habit to another. So once you've really mastered one particular habit, then you can even think to yourself, where do I want to do that thing? And you can pin it to another habit. So I think the individual side is to start small. And on the team side, it's to establish the processes. And I think one of the most important things is to make sure people carve out the time to do the habit, and even put it up the ability to have some music play in the background, because that really helps. And even have to carve out the time and even have accountability partners. Like somebody needs to do one particular type of task on every Friday. Most people just leave that to chance. Well, if there's a time block in their calendar to do that particular task, and somebody else has an equivalent task, and they can both tackle it on the same work session, then you can pin both of those habits together and block out the time so that they know they're doing it, and they can help take each other through the end. So I think that might be a way to do it on the team level. Also, there's just so much to thinking about habits and processes just in general, like that we can go into in a longer conversation a little bit later, especially when you're thinking about offloads and reducing the cognitive bandwidth, which ends up being one of the biggest obstacles to doing tasks in the first place.
Thank you.
So hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. Yep, thank you.
All right. Glad you guys enjoyed the session. Any other questions? We'll grab a couple more minutes.
Sorry, I have a question. So I've read Atomic Habits. I've read a lot of the other productivity books, and I've actually successfully applied some of these things. The one thing that hasn't worked for me for some reason is putting to-dos in my, to-dos on my calendar, and actually like also like sticking to like those focus blocks. And I think part of it is like what Chuck was saying, like, being the firefighter, right? Like I'm just used to like, I want to help people. So how do you like, I don't know, how do you get yourself to stick to what's on your calendar? I know part of it is what you were saying, like the jump starts, and I do put in links and stuff in there, but it's also just like, it's like stopping what you're doing and starting the next thing because it's time to, as opposed to, okay, let me just finish this because it's harder to start over and then I have to move that block. So it's, it's that kind of mental game.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. So okay. The first thing here is that if you plan out, if you just do it intermittently, where you just throw 1 or 2 tasks on your calendar, I don't think it's going to work. And it won't work because you'll look at all this free time and think, okay, if I don't get this task done now, it's okay. I've got another 8 hours of open space on my calendar that I can get it done. So there's no pressure. If you build out your calendar and fully book it, and truly understand the number of things that you've got to get done over the course of the week, there's a little bit of pressure there. And you realize that you've got to be careful about how you spend every minute. So I think that's one thing. I think that jump starts are definitely a way, and if you're using them, that's great. I think that using techniques like the Pomodoro technique, so to get into the zone as soon as you've done it, are super effective. Even if you have an iPhone or app, you can just email me. I typed in my email into the chat. I'll type it in again. But that can be a really great way of just immediately like triggering it to get in the zone. I have a particular app that I use called Focus Time. If I hit that play button, it makes this sound, and I've listened to that sound like probably 10,000 times now. It just means shut everything off and get in the zone and focus. Another point is that we often can struggle with estimating, just like you were just saying. So you have to be give yourself some leeway when you're starting out with these techniques to be poor at estimating and realize that you need to change those time blocks and move things around so that you can get things done. I think that's also something that comes into play. We have a particular service called Zone that where we go into this in a lot of detail, but you'll need very specific strategies to do it. The other thing too is that if you don't feel confident about the task that you're working on and you think in your mind, I should be working on something else, that's an obstacle in and of itself. And if you don't plan your calendar out where you have confidence in your calendar, then you're going to be second guessing yourself for the course of the entire week and things are going to get behind. Not to mention strategies around dealing with interruptions and working through your own identity. So there's a lot there, and we're really happy to have that more in-depth discussion with you about it.
One just follow-up question. How do you deal with, like, I don't use Calendly, I use SavvyCal, which is similar. And I often have to provide it for like partners or vendors so that they schedule time with me.
Yeah.
So do you have a block that you allow people to schedule meetings with, or how do you handle that in this paradigm?
Yeah, so there's two things. Is if I think that there are tasks that are that people can schedule over. I'll mark them as free on my calendar. So Calendly can basically look at those free and busy blocks and overwrite them. So that's one thing that I'll do. The other thing I often do is just ask people, you know, I only book a week in advance. So 2 weeks out, anybody can get me. So if I'll even write in the Calendly invite, if you cannot find time with me next week and you need it, shoot me an email and then we'll work it out. I'll send you some time. So that's the other way that I handle that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I would just like to jump in. I know we're at 5 till and a lot of folks have to get back to their day jobs, hopefully more energized and more productive. So I would like to say thank you so much for presenting to us today, Prasanth. This was great. I'm reading some of the comments, just super. So thank you so much. I feel more productive already just listening to you, at least every time I speak with you. So just a heads up, we have our Global Presenter Series next month in October is from GTM Hub on OKRs. I think the whole thought process around agile thinking and OKRs ties in very well to what Double Gemini is doing in terms of productivity. We're going to follow up, I know Laura will, with kind of a recap on everything that you saw today. So links and how to get a hold of Prasanth. We have a number of member companies, organizations that are working with Prasanth and Double Gemini, and the reporting back is great. That makes us super happy here at the COO Forum because that means we're bringing the right partners to the table for you all to benefit at the end of the day. Our goal here is to help you all achieve more through your membership, and partners like Double Gemini do that for us. So with that, I want to say thank you to all. And if anyone wants to stay on, I know Prasanth's probably on here for another few minutes, but again, thank you and have a great weekend.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Prasanth.
Yep.